have any need for in your personal lives. Right. I think the other way of saying it is, if you're not the Lord, then you need to work on forgiving people, because I think that this is part of being less than perfect, is that we hold grudges. I want to just invite you as we start to say, are you not going to the teen Monday?
The tea?
Yeah, it's over in the library one. You'll enjoy that one more, I think. If you could maybe focus on an incident or two in your life that stands out as something that caused pain, of the more substantial note kind. Not something where you'd say, oh yeah, they didn't mean it. It really hurt, but they didn't mean it. But where it felt like, yeah, it was done on purpose. Okay? Because that's what we're talking about in this, is when it feels like someone did you dirt on purpose and it is causing consequences. Okay? I'm going to read two scripture stories just to start, and then we'll refer back to them later. Okay? And so here we are, starting with a really serious issue, right? Early in the morning he came to the temple, and all the people came to him, and he sat down and taught them. Then the scribes and the Pharisees brought to him a woman caught in adultery. And when they'd set her in the midst, they said to her, "Teacher, this woman was caught in adultery in the very act." So no doubt that it happened. She was caught. Now Moses in the law commanded that such should be stoned. But what do you say? This they said, testing him, that they might have something of which to accuse him. See, the Lord had been talking about love, and they were saying, okay, so how far does your love thing go? Okay, here's a test case. But Jesus stooped down and wrote on the ground with his finger as though he did not hear. So when they continued asking him, he raised himself up and said to them, "He who is without sin among you, let him throw a stone at her first." And again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. Then those who heard it, being convicted by their conscience, went out one by one, beginning with the oldest even to the last. And Jesus was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. When Jesus had raised himself up and saw no one but the woman, he said to her, "Woman, where are those accusers of yours? Has no one passed sentence on you?" And she said, "No one, Lord." And Jesus said to her, "Neither do I pass sentence on you. Go and sin no more." If you have a good memory, you might have noticed that I did that last bit differently than you've ever heard it probably. What you're probably used to is, "Has no one condemned you?" And she said, "No one, Lord." And Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you." But in a court of law, there are two phases. There's, are you guilty or not? And then there's the sentencing. We were past, is she guilty or not? She was caught in the act. She was condemned. But Jesus gave her a commuted sentence. Okay, neither do I pass sentence on you. I think that's really important, because she was guilty, there was no doubt. And that's what the Greek says, by the way. Past sentence is the accurate translation. Another one. You know these stories. You've heard them all your life. They're really big ones, and we'll come back to them. So the Lord had been talking about forgiveness. So Peter came to him and said to him, "Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Up to 7 times?" It's pretty generous. You know, if my brother pops me in the nose 7 times, am I allowed to really take a cricket bat to him the 8th time? Okay? Jesus said to him, "I do not say to you up to 7 times, but up to 70 times 7. Anyone do the math on that?
490.
490, thank you, yeah. So in other words, beyond what you can count, you know. Andrew's done this to me 223, oh no wait, it's 224, you just can't keep track for that many times, right? "Therefore the kingdom of heaven is like a certain king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. And when he begun to settle accounts, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. Think 2 billion pounds, give or take. Some numbers have it higher, some have it lower, but that's about the average. But he was not able to pay his master. As he was not able, his master commanded that he be sold, with his wife and children, and all that he had, and payment be made. And that was a common practice in those days, to pay debts. The servant therefore fell down before him, saying, Master, have patience with me, and I will pay you all. Which is utterly untrue, right? Patrick, have mercy on me. I will pay you all from my pastor's salary. It's not going to happen, okay? This was a debt beyond repayment. Then the master of that servant was moved with compassion and released him and forgave him the debt. But that servant went out and found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii. 100 denarii was about a third of a year's wage. So, let's say 10,000 pounds. Okay? And laid his hands on him and took him by the throat. Already we have not such a good attitude compared to the first guy who was owed a lot more. Saying, pay what you owe. So his fellow servant fell down at his feet and begged him and said, have patience with me and I will pay you all. Exactly the same words. And he would not, and went and threw him into prison till he should pay the debt. So when his fellow servants saw what had been done, they were very grieved, and came and told their master all that had been done. Then his master, after he had called him, said to him, you wicked servant, I forgave you all that debt because you begged me. Should you not also have had compassion on your fellow servant, just as I had pity on you? And the master was angry and delivered him to the torturers until he should pay all that was due him. So my heavenly Father will also do to you, if each of you from his heart do not forgive others his trespasses. Now that's a little bit of a rough ending, because it seems like the Lord's delivering us to the torturers. We're told very clearly that that's just a reflection of, it seems like the Lord delivers us to the torturers, but when we have unforgiveness in our heart, we bring that torture upon ourselves. All right. So that's intense language, right? Torturers, taking by the throat. And that's not inappropriate when talking about unforgiveness. And I want you to just think for a moment about the intensity of your internal dialogue when you feel hurt by someone. How violent it is, how strong the language is, how at times happy you would be if something dire happens to that person. It's really intense. So this imagery is a reflection of that. Okay, test time. What was the main message of Grant's talk?
Sorry, pardon?
What was the main message of Grant's talk?
Repentance is the key.
Repentance is the key.
God, asking for the Lord's help.
Yeah, you take responsibility for your life. The Lord's already forgiven you. But you can't receive it unless you open up your heart to it, right? Okay, very simple message. Now we turn to this forgiving other people issue. The one that I think so many of us struggle with. I think a lot of us struggle with the first one. You know, if I were to ask you, do you feel harder with that the Lord can forgive me for the bad things I've done, or is it harder for me to forgive others? You know, we probably have some variety here. I know some people just feel tortured about the things that they've done. They're both very real. And that's because forgiveness is so hard. And the funny thing is, it's situational. You know, somebody can do something terrible to you. And if you're in a good place, it's just water off a duck's back. Right? And we've all experienced that, where someone's done something awful, and we're able to just completely brush it off. And then at other times, where we have a vulnerability, it can just sink in and take root and become this huge, huge thing in our lives. You know, and it can sometimes be so small. You know, do any of you remember that thing that teacher said in year 2 that still haunts you? You know, those little things that have just somehow sunk in and caused pain. We all have vulnerabilities in some areas and not in others. And then there are obviously big things that we would all have trouble with. You know, if you're in Ukraine right now, you probably have a hard time forgiving Putin. And that's just sort of a universal, right? This person destroyed my business. Anyone would have a hard time with that. So why does forgiveness hurt so much? Or why does that harm hurt so much? What's your thought? Why do we have that intense reaction?
Why does forgiveness hurt?
No, why does unforgiveness, or why is it so hard? Why does it hurt so much when someone does something rotten to us? Yeah, Mark?
It feels an attack on yourself,
Yeah.
your identity.
Yeah.
It's attacking your love. It's attacking your love. It's
Attack on
attacking your loves.
Yeah. Yeah.
On the love of yourself.
Yeah. Well, that too, yes. The attack on your ego sometimes, yeah. And?
Well, I find it particularly hard to forgive people who I expected more from. If I feel betrayed, then it's hard. If it's just some person that I don't really have a relationship with, I find that it is, as you say, easier to dismiss.
Mm-hmm.
But if I feel personally betrayed, then it's very hard.
Yeah. Isn't betrayal such a big thing about forgiveness? Some random person in the street does something, it's a lot harder, easier to deal with that than if it was, you know, your mother or your sibling or your spouse or something like that.
And I think also when it's attached to your sense of what is right and what's and wrong.
Yeah.
And if it goes against what you think are the standards of decent behaviour, it's not fair.
Yeah, that's true. And it's not fair, and that's why, we're universally outraged by something like child abuse. Because we all know right away a child cannot defend themselves. And here I'm just getting emotional saying that word. It's just so unfair, right?
So should we forgive child abusers?
Yes!
How?
And that's part of what we're going to talk about. That's part of what we're going to talk about, okay? So that's great question. Perfect lead in. Thank you.
What about if somebody killed your parents in front of you? I have a friend whose family were massacred.
Right, yeah. So this is part of what I want to talk about, because I think often what we take forgiveness to mean something that it's not. Okay? And I think that we need to keep forgiveness in its appropriate space, and then that allows us to take action while forgiving. Alec, in the young people's class, said, forgiveness and justice are two separate things. And I thought, okay, good line, good line. I want to go there. So here's my little one-liner on why I think forgiveness is so hard, why it hurts so much when someone does something. When someone harms you, they introduce a hell into your spirit that you were not prepared to deal with. And you are forced to deal with those evil spirits. And just to go back to the obvious, something like child abuse, something that we recognize right away that's so horrific about that is that innocent little child was in no way capable of dealing with the evil spirits that were introduced by that activity. And that's why it's so damaging. But it's also true when somebody explodes at us and we had no idea it was coming. We're introduced to a hell that we didn't have our armor up. If we had our armor up, if someone said, look, I need to say something hard, and your armor was up, totally different response. It's that it came out of the blue, and those hells got in a way that we weren't able to respond. I think that's what really does the lasting damage, is the presence of that hell, often sitting in the background without our even noticing it, because we say, Andrew, you did that to me, instead of saying, these guys did that to me. These guys are doing the real damage. That misdirection is a big, big thing. Doesn't mean that you don't need to deal with the person, but that's not where the super damage comes in. So, you know what happens with unforgiveness. You have rage, you have revenge, you have pain, depression, black moods, acting out in ways we thought we'd never do. One of the most painful things is that we often act out in the very ways that we were hurt. You know, people brought up in violent homes often act out in violent ways. People who were sexually abused as children often act out sexually. And that's part of the nature of the hell itself, is that hell got into us and it encouraged us to do exactly that thing that was done to us. That's part of the hell of it. Yeah, Lisa?
Just a quick one, because I'm just a little bit worried about you should forgive them 400 plus times.
Yeah.
Because that kind of infers that you should let them do it 400 plus times.
Oh, yeah. So hold fire on that one.
Oh.
We're definitely going to get to.
Okay.
The answer is no.
Well, so how would you get to forgive them that many times?
Yeah. No, we'll get to
that.
that. I think that there are an awful lot of things that you don't let someone do 2 times.
Yeah.
Okay. And one of our biggest mistakes is we let it happen 5, 6, 7, 8, 17 times.
Yeah.
So, Martin?
We turn the other cheek.
Yeah, we turn the other cheek in ways that aren't appropriate.
One question I would give in maybe you
Yeah,
alluded to that
please.
yesterday, whether there's a difference in forgiving others depending on how that person views his actions or her actions, whether that person shows any sign of
Yeah,
repentance or they're just proud of what they did.
Can you, right, what if they never show they're sorry? Okay, so where I'm headed is, there are 2 things, there are 2 distinctly different words. Forgiveness is about what goes inside your heart, irrespective of what the other person does. Reconciliation is what can happen if the other person is sorry and is willing to move towards you. Okay? And we often associate the 2 with each other, but they're really distinctive things. Okay? And we are going to get to the, the action part of it, the stuff that you were bringing up.
Right.
So I'm starting with the principles and then we'll get to the application. Okay? One of the things about unforgiveness is that it's a little bit like grief. Any of you who've suffered a significant loss knows that when the grief comes, it's like it happened yesterday. And it's just intense. And unforgiveness has that same experience, is that, that when we feel the pain, it's like it happened yesterday. It's sharp. Because in the instance of unforgiveness, it's about a hellish community that has access to us. And when they have access to us, they're doing it all over again. Not our fault. It's not our fault that they're there. But that's what's happening. So we know that we're supposed to forgive, and the point of the 70 times 7, 490, is you're always supposed to forgive, because you can't count to 490, you can't keep track. And this just has confused the dickens out of so many people because they take that in the wrong way. But this is really important. Grant was talking about the importance of repenting, and this morning we said these words: forgive us our debts, as to the extent that we forgive our debtors. So if we want to repent, if we want to receive the Lord's forgiveness, we have to be giving it out. And that's a really challenging thing. And I'm guessing that some of you, when you were hearing, what Grant was saying, were maybe thinking, oh my, I'm in trouble, because I have this huge thing, huge mound of things that I need to repent of. Well, don't we all? Is there hope? And we know that the Lord's a God of love, but I don't feel like it because all I see is the pain. I was just talking to someone who said, you say I'm making progress. I don't feel it. I just feel the pain. And here we're told, you receive forgiveness to the extent that you give it. And I think that this might be a really useful way. If you feel badly about yourself, it might actually be a useful way to channel that energy, is to work on forgiving others, and we'll talk about what that means. The Lord also said something very similar Give and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down and running over will be put into your bosom, for with the same measure you use, it will be measured back to you. So if you can give other people compassion, you can receive compassion. Okay, how did Grant define forgiveness?
Away, move away, remove.
Remit.
Go.
Yeah, give off, give away, remit, right. This is the earlier draft of what he sent me. Okay, does that work?
To give up or cease to harbor.
I might not forgive you for your spelling.
What? Oh, yeah. Well, that's actually Grant's spelling, cut and paste. I refuse to accept responsibility for spell checking my own work.
Where is it misspelling?
Harbor.
No, he changed it when he presented it to us.
Harbor.
Oh, did Grant fix it?
Yeah.
Ah, look at that. See, Grant spell checks his work. I apparently don't.
You forgive him for...
That's right, yeah. That's right. Anything else that you would add? What do you... to forgiveness? Mark said in worship last night, it's a hard one to define.
I was surprised at the definitions from the writings, which were more about separating good from evil. And I was trying to reconcile those to, the common understanding.
Okay, that's part of where we're going to go today. Okay. So that's, I'm glad you're wrestling with that. Yeah, Anne?
I disagree with the last clause, to cease to impose punishment. I know that that's the dictionary definition in certain settings, but I think probably you're going to talk about how that isn't necessarily true.
All right. Okay. Yeah, that absolutely can be true. That someone can be punished and we can still forgive them. Okay, so here's Webster's. To cease to feel resentment against an offender. I like that word resentment. Because resentment is very different from saying they did wrong. Right?
But then you're owning the resentment, aren't you?
Yeah, that's right. Forgiveness, and we're going to come back to this again and again, forgiveness is something 100% that happens inside your own spirit. Your actions towards the person may or may not change in the circumstances. There might be times when it's still actually good to pop them in the nose, even when you've done the forgiveness.
You like that example?
I know. Yeah, yes, great.
As I say, it's kind of useful when you've read articles and whatever to think of, I was thinking of a person in particular who felt that she could forgive the Nazis, whatever. People have died and gone and you still have, you haven't forgiven. So the process, that sort of points to the forgiveness is in you.
Right.
Because they're not going to reconcile, they're not here anymore. So the forgiveness is still, the anger is still within your own.
That's true.
That makes it clear for me to go, that's what forgiveness is about, what's going on in your own head.
It's true. That means you can work on forgiving your mother who's long dead and all of that. Catherine?
Isn't it actually a ceasing of the entertainment of the hells that invaded in the first place? To a degree.
Yeah.
It's a choosing not to entertain
that. And entertain is such a good word because, when you entertain, you put out food for them. And I think we sometimes do that to the hells. Like, come on in. Here's something nice. Yeah.
In other words, just to follow on what Catherine was saying, there is the pain, the raw pain, but we immediately embroider it with all of our own thoughts. It's that second reaction, why I think it's happened and impugning that to the other person.
Yeah.
But actually it's to stay with the pain and work through the pain.
Yeah. Here's a definition from the Arcana. That to which no attention is paid is said to be forgiven. Think about how much airtime someone's negative actions can take up inside your own space. Rent-free, right? You invite it back in and just give it time. So again, I'm trying to not turn this towards the internal. We'll get to the what do you do about it part. Okay. When you say, I want you to notice that all of these are defined by opposite. They're all in the negative, you know. No more resentment. Don't pay attention. Cease to harbor. It's easier to define forgiveness by what it's not than by what it is. We'll come up to a positive definition a little bit later. But to a certain extent, forgiveness is the absence of hellish feelings. To a certain extent, if I can just get free of hell, whew, wow, that's pretty cool. Wouldn't you like to be free of hell? I would.
Erik?
Yeah?
That's a very powerful phrase from the Heavenly Secrets. Because it's a process. That can't happen in a day or even in a week or in a year. Because in the beginning you do need to pay attention to what is actually what has happened and to deal with it, whether that's pain, reconciliation, etc. So it's a process.
Thank you.
But I like the idea that that could be the end point.
Brilliant. You saved me a whole slide. No, I mean you said it really beautifully. I didn't mean that facetiously. That was really nicely said.
Did Karen mean that it's without time? It's outside of time, in the sense that it could I think I can forgive quite quickly, but depending on the situation.
If a really deep hurt would.
You're talking about a really deep hurt.
Really deep
I'm just
hurt,
saying that forgiveness doesn't have to take years and years.
Yeah.
Agreed.
In some circumstances. I saw Mark and then John.
It made me think about riding a motorbike, and you're taught not to look at the tree. Don't look at the tree. Don't look at the tree.
Yeah.
Where are you looking?
Yeah. That's true.
I don't get it.
But if you look at the tree, you're aiming for the tree.
You don't want to drive into the tree.
So you shouldn't think about this sin or evil that someone has done to you. You shouldn't look at it. You shouldn't look at it. But you don't understand the shouldn't.
Yeah. And at times you very, very badly need to, because sometimes we actually paper it over, and that's also equally bad. But I hear you.
And then actually when you ski, and if you're thinking about the trees, you're looking at the trees, but what you should think about is the path.
Yeah.
Think about the way.
Yeah. Good, thank you.
Shifting that focus.
Yeah. Yeah. John.
It's the element of not paying attention. So someone does something.
Yeah.
And my reaction is, they need help. I want to help that person. Have I forgiven them? Yeah, I've forgiven them. But I am paying it even more attention than I was before.
Yeah.
In the hope that some kind of positive relationship and an improvement can emerge.
Right, and now you're doing you guys are just too mature. I wish you would be less mature. Because you keep on jumping to construction. No, I mean, seriously, but you're paying attention to the same issue very differently, aren't you? You're not paying attention to, you hurt me, you hurt me, you hurt me. You're paying attention to, in what way can I make your life better? That's a completely, even though it's the same category, you're paying attention very differently.
I'm still hurt.
Yes, yes, yes. Catherine.
Yeah, I remember you saying to me, I mean, the other day a lady made a mistake, and I just said it immediately. It was a very simple thing. I said, don't worry, it's fine, don't worry about it. I forgave her instantly because it was just an error. And then I've had another thing happen that I've held on to for 30 years that I still struggle with. And I remember saying to you, I didn't understand how my mother could forgive people so quickly, because a friend of hers did something and all her friends were saying, Barbara, why are you... And she just said, I just let it go. I didn't take any notice of it, but all her friends were going, you should have been really upset about it. And she wasn't. She'd forgiven this lady almost instantly. And you said to me, well, your mother's had 40 more years practice. And I remember that thinking, gosh, we're work in progress, and I'm learning how to forgive people, and maybe Mum's better at it because she's had 40 more years. Yeah. Well, actually more than that.
Bravo.
Is it 40?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, she's had 40 more years of forgiving people, and she's got good at it. And she just doesn't let it affect her or entertain it. And it was, even with all these other people around her going, she wasn't going to entertain that? She just forgave the lady. I love that.
Yeah.
And what you said to me gave me hope that in the future I might get a bit better at it.
That's good. Yeah, Fritz.
I particularly like this last definition, with which I wasn't familiar yet, because I tended to think forgiveness more as a judgmental thing. Either something isn't forgiven yet or something is forgiven. And this definition makes it more something dynamic, more like a state that you are paying attention to something or you aren't, and it may get worse again at the future stage.
Yeah.
It makes it more dynamic.
I like that because that's much more reflects normal reality, doesn't it? Yeah. John.
If you, most of the examples you've given are to me in the past tense. Somebody did something to
Right.
you.
Yeah.
How do you deal with a circumstance where you feel the person is still popping you on the nose?
Yeah. Okay, we'll get there.
Right.
Hang on, I'm just going to duck that one. Eileen?
I think not forgiving harms you as a person more than forgiving, actually. Because whatever has happened, and I always give people the benefit of the doubt anyway, and think there must have been, or may have been a reason that they did whatever they did that annoyed me. And I hope that's not really papering over the cracks or the real issue. But I don't want to be harmed by thinking, I don't like so-and-so because they did this.
Yeah, I think that's a good attitude. On the whole, obviously it could be taken too far, but I think it's a good place to be. And I suspect that a lot of us can do that in a lot of places, and then there are areas where it just sinks in and it stings, and that's where we do the work. So I want to do some forgiveness is not things. Okay? Forgiveness is not pretending it never happened or judging it wrong. It's kind of obvious, but I think that's what we often do. We're told to judge righteous judgment. Someone cheats you, you're supposed to say they cheated, it was wrong. If someone says something cruel, there's no virtue in pretending that it wasn't cruel. It's actually often a false politeness, and it actually gets in the way of genuine forgiveness. Forgiveness is not saying, oh no, what happened? It's saying it did happen and I choose not to focus on it. That's very different. There's a True Christian Religion 459 says it's a common belief that if someone asks you for forgiveness for the same thing 10 times, you're supposed to forgive them automatically. The very fact of asking for it means just boom, I forgive you. And the way it's spoken of there, it's like, oh, it's like it never existed. And there's a really sad reality in conservative Christian circles where a philandering spouse is allowed to come back and say, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. And the 10th time you're supposed to say, I forgive you, because that's what Jesus said. And that's not what the Lord is saying is right. There's a big difference between judging, saying it was bad, and condemning, saying you're an evil person for doing this. The Lord said, neither do I pass sentence on you. Okay? It's the wanting to pick up the stone and throw it at them that is the dangerous part. It is not the noticing that it was wrong. That's a really important distinction. Won't fixate on it. And here's the passage that Karen gave me the summary of, and I'll just read the last sentence. This shows what the forgiveness of sins is, and that it cannot take place within an hour nor within a year. Okay, for the really big ones, it's going to be a long process. That fits with your experience, doesn't it? Someone's defrauded you. It's really hard to let it go. It takes years often, yeah?
Well, just if it felt big to me.
Right.
It may even have been something that they didn't intend, but really cut me to the quick.
Right.
A close, intimate friend. I have to work on forgiving for a long time, no matter whether they meant it or not.
Yeah, that's true. Very true. And another way of thinking about this is that you can overcome the resentment, but the trust may take a long time to rebuild. Right? Okay, another one. Forgiving is not forgetting. and this is so obvious, if someone, has mistreated their children, you don't send your children over to their house. That's just one of those really basic things. If someone has been dishonest with you, you are supposed to hold that in mind and be doubtful of what they say if it seems doubtful. That is part of what happens, and that's not being unforgiving. That's a really, really big thing. And that's why the Lord said, go and sin no more. The test of whether someone's trustworthy or not is if they don't do that thing for a period of time. When someone's been dishonest, if someone says those snappy things that sink in that are, even though they're small, they hurt. Or if someone's been unfaithful, you can work through those, but you don't forget it. You better not forget it. Just don't let it beat you up. And I want to say something that I said to the children that is maybe the most important thing that I'll say today. No one ever gets away with anything. If someone does evil to you with intent, they have brought hell into their own lives. It's happened instantly, and the consequence to them is infinitely greater than anything they can do to you. Because that is hurting them from the inside, whereas someone, as much as they can hurt you from the outside, is only able to hurt your external body, your external spirit. Okay? They are always punished more than they can possibly hurt you. So think about the worst hurt that's occurred to you. For some of you, that's going to be pretty substantial. It is not as bad as what that person did to themselves by doing it. Now, obviously, sometimes people did something completely unintentionally, and it still cut you to the quick. And those are let's leave those aside, because sometimes there's accidental harm. I'm talking about the ones that really hurt are where it seems to have been done with malice. Yeah.
I mean, that helps me with something like Hitler. He didn't get away with anything, even though he killed himself and skipped off. But that doesn't. But if it's someone I love and we have a relationship, and they hurt me, it doesn't do me. I don't feel any relief thinking, oh well, they hurt themselves worse. And that doesn't.
Yeah.
That doesn't help me.
Maybe not, but maybe sometimes, because I think part of what is hard with forgiveness is the injustice of it. That wasn't fair. That person gossiped about me. Other people believed it. And my reputation's tarred, and here they are, sweet and free and happy.
It does mean that I don't have to worry about being the punisher, I guess.
Yeah, I'm just different things that can release us. I saw a hand on the back row. Go on.
That was me.
That was you.
Opposite to Anne, my focus there was that I find relief in they can only hurt me externally, no matter the extent of the pain.
Yeah,
that's really helpful.
That's
really helpful.
It feels kind of deep, right? If you pick on the more extreme things, someone killed my parents, that feels like it's pretty affected my life, but it's still in the relatively external part because we didn't choose it. All the things that we choose are deeper than all of the things that we didn't choose.
I think that's the most important thing that you said.
Yeah. And that's why forgiveness is so important, because when we choose resentment, we're actually doing the damage in here for the damage that someone did out here. Yeah.
But what about when they seem to get away with it?
Yeah.
And say, for example, if someone had their parents,
and
the people that did it were never forgiven.
Yeah.
Surely that would how could you forgive that, because they're out having fun and you're actually doing the sentence because you haven't got your parents anymore?
Yeah. I know. Isn't that hard?
Yeah.
And so let's just take that example. No, let's back off to something really small. Okay. Someone says something sharp to you, and it really stung, and 3 hours later you're still stewing about it. What have they been doing the last 3 hours?
Enjoying their life.
Enjoying their life, right. So who suffered from that? It's only you, right? Now, because it's a small thing, you can step back and say, right, I could have had those 3 hours back if I hadn't stewed on them. And it seems obvious, like, oh, right, that was self-inflicted damage because I chose to stew on that thing that someone said that I didn't need to spend that time on. And the thing with forgiveness for something like murder or all of those big things that we think about is that we're still responsible for what we dwell on. Only we can be responsible for what we dwell on.
But wouldn't that be true as well then for the people that actually did that, and if they didn't then dwell on the fact that they'd done it and they're like, oh, it's not that bad, I forgive myself, I'm fine. Surely they're kind of getting away with it as well.
That's the thing, is they're not, because when you do something with intent, you invite those hells into your life. And they don't go away unless you actively repent. They do not go away. So when someone does something serious, they are literally putting themselves in hell.
But they seem to enjoy it so
much. I know. And that's the thing about this freedom in this world, is you can seem to get away with it, but the reality is you're not. And I think that's something we have to hold. We think about, the rich, rapacious billionaire who's built his fortune on widows' pensions, and think, oh, that guy's happy. He's not. He's miserable. He's absolutely miserable because he's living this life of avarice and fear. And so there's this appearance that is not reality, and we get sucked into that. But I think, Louisa, I would say that's actually not really the issue. They never get away with it is nice to know. The real thing is, are you going to spend those 3 hours making yourself miserable? Have you heard the phrase, unforgiveness is drinking poison hoping it kills the other person?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think the fairness thing trips us up possibly more than anything. Because that's the point of evil. It is unfair. It is. And there's nothing we can do to make it fair. And in this world, there may be nothing that we can do. I mean, think of all the people who've lost their homes in Ukraine. In this lifetime, many of them are never going to get back to normalcy. Or all of the refugees who've been flooding Europe for the last decade and some. They're never going to get back to normalcy, many of them. Some of them are still living in refugee camps 10 years later. That's not... The unfairness of it bothers us. And the point of forgiveness is we actually have to deflect from that to say, am I willing to let hell in my own life? Because you can find peace in an unpeaceful world. And that's the thing that we need to find.
Quite often people say in the situation of a murder, that once the culprit gets a sentence and gets some sort of jail sentence, let's say, they then talk about getting closure.
Yeah.
That's an interesting aspect of this.
Right, and we'd like that. We'd like that, and sometimes we get it, and that's wonderful. Sometimes we don't get it, and yet we still have to figure out how to let go of the resentment, don't we? Yeah.
I think one of the issues is that our internal only sees other people's external.
Great.
So that's the problem Louisa's got, is there's an appearance they're happy living their lives, going on, doing their thing, and we don't get to see what's going on internally in them.
Right. Yeah.
You're saying they've invited hells in, and we don't see that.
Right.
So that's the tricky disparity in it.
Yep. I know, when I see politicians lying and cheating and seemingly succeeding, I've actually tried to train myself to think, wow, what an absolutely miserable existence that must be to have to live that way. And I think it really is. I actually feel pity, because it's a horrible thing, even if the person gets to be prime minister or president or dictator or whatever it is, position they're in. Yeah, Mark?
Which leads to my question. Is it necessary to forgive? Is it necessary for me to forgive Putin?
Yes. For your own soul's sake.
But then how do you help advance fairness in the world?
Yeah, that's right. So this is, now we're going to go back to Alex's brilliant point. Forgiveness and justice are not the same thing. Okay? Forgiveness is about what's happening in your heart. Justice is about the action that you take in the world. I'm talking about things forgiveness isn't. I'm going to get to what forgiveness is.
Can I go back to Putin just for one moment?
Yeah.
Because in a sense I have no relationship with him.
Yeah.
It's the evil or the what I see as external.
Yeah.
It's the selfishness that he embodies that I see.
Right.
And that's the only relationship I have with the man.
Right.
And so in a way do I forgive him? I don't know. I've not really thought about it. And we could have picked. That was just one figure. But
right. And we could pick millions of people.
You could pick lots of those things or people who are out there in the world who are quite distant from who embody characteristics that I find nauseous.
Yeah, that's true.
So can I be a devil's advocate? Well,
go ahead.
Can I say devil's advocate?
Yes, you can.
Okay. So where is the Lord in this?
Yeah.
In the middle.
So, what has Putin's invasion to Ukraine done? It's actually said to many, many people, oh, we actually value democracy. We value freedom. We value freedom of speech. Now, is that a fair price to have paid? Maybe not. But there has, in some sense, been good that has emerged from this terrible tragedy.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Now, I think that there got to be better ways of getting to good.
Yeah. No, it's in spite of Putin, not because of Putin.
Yeah, but I'm actually pleased to see much of the rest of the world pulling together in a constructive way. The generosity of people, the people that have opened their homes. Where is he? I don't know.
Andrew.
To Ukrainian refugees. Some good has come out of it. Whether it's hanging on the up or down, balancing it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a great comment, John. Thank you. And to Mark, one of the things I would say for a lot of people is, do we need to make a judgment? Do you actually need to decide whether Rishi Sunak is a good or bad person? I mean, do you really need to? Do you really need to decide whether John Travolta is someone that, I mean, you know what I mean? We make these judgments about people all the time that we really have no need to make. And so we end up with, oh, I need to forgive him. Now, Putin, I think that forgiveness is a real thing because he's done demonstrable harm that we can abhor to real people that some of us know. So that is more personal, but sometimes I think we get high and mighty about things that we don't need to, and we invite hell in. I'm going to push forward.
Yeah.
One more thing. There's a big difference between unforgiveness and grief, or forgiveness and grief. You can forgive someone and still be terribly sad that something happened. I think people often get this one messed up. If I forgive, then it's like it never happened. I can't feel my feelings. I've just got to pretend it never existed. And that's, I think, a deeply false idea. I'm going to give you a passage, and I'm not going to read it because we've talked a lot. The man, they asked the Lord if he was going to heal a man with a withered hand on the Sabbath. And it said, and he looked around at them with anger, being grieved for the hardness of their hearts. And I love that phrase, because here's the Lord looking stern, but inside he had grief and compassion. And I think that that's a place that we can imagine getting to. What Eileen said a minute ago about just feeling sorry about that situation. Grief and forgiveness can go together. Don't let yourself fall back in. Forgiveness means I have to pretend it never happened. Okay? Okay, here's another definition of forgiveness. To forgive someone is to regard anyone from the point of view, not from the point of view of evil, but from the point of view of good. Okay? So, what would viewing Putin from the point of view of good be like versus on the point of view of evil. I've heard a bunch of people say, I would be so happy if one of those drones could take out Putin. I would dance on his grave. I don't think that's looking at it from the point of view of good. Saying, I would be happy if that threat were removed. I would really, really be happy if Ukraine was safe. That's looking from the point of view of good. So this starts to get at why forgiveness is what's happening in here. It's, are we looking at that person from love, which might mean we feel compassion, we feel grief, we feel a desire for justice. Those are all good things. But feeling hate, I would dance on your grave and spit on it. That's the stuff we have to avoid. Yeah.
So could that include just saying, look, I think that person's been influenced by evil,
yeah,
and praying that perhaps they could be influenced by good or get better or make different decisions and say, look, this war's ridiculous, let's...
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
So the word that we translate as mercy is probably better translated compassion. The Lord has mercy, He has compassion. So think about having compassion, feeling sorry for the pain in someone else's life. Now, if it's someone who abused your child, that's going to be incredibly hard. It can be done. That's going to be the work of a lifetime, like Karen was saying. And people have talked about doing that. There are people who went to concentration camps who talked about, I learned to have compassion on those people. It can be done, but that's a long, 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 long time. But that's the goal.
Mercy is an implication of punishment, isn't there? There's compassion, there isn't really.
There can be punishment. There can be punishment in both instances.
Yeah, in general, I mean.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
The judge having mercy on the condemned man. You don't usually say the judge has compassion on the condemned man. What it means is he decided not to have him hung after all.
Yeah, right. And see, this is where the religious language needs to change from the political language, because you can have compassion and mercy and call the cops. Okay? And that's just a really important one. Is about your internal reaction. I'm choosing not to act from hate, but this person did something that is a danger to society and a danger to me and to my family. That needs to stop. You can do that without hate. Yeah, Brenda.
What I was going to say is there's a very clear line in my head between if I was in a concentration camp and what was done to me, I might well be able to forgive, to think, well, perhaps that he's had a bad day, so he took it out on me and this, that and the other. But what right do I have to forgive them for what they're doing to that little child or that poor old lady or something? There's two very different things. I can forgive for myself, but I can't forgive for other people.
Yeah, it's very hard, isn't it?
I wouldn't even put myself in that position. If somebody had tortured my mother, I would not even contemplate saying, I have a right to forgive them. That would seem so evil. I would be stepping beyond a boundary I shouldn't step.
Well, unless you're saying I have the right, therefore, to hate them.
No, I've right to place it in the Lord's lap to deal with it.
Okay, no, that's a healthy attitude.
I can't say I'd forgive you.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, I can see that.
Your love is greater for somebody who has been tormented or.
Yeah. It can be harder to forgive someone who hurts my child than it can be to forgive someone who hurt me.
Yes, and I wouldn't go there.
Yeah.
I was thinking of a much different example, which is thinking about being angry at my own children when they were being a right royal pain, and enacting what I hope was justice, but not hating them, just lots of compassion, but still needing to have laws and rules and justice.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to start skipping a lot of my notes. Okay. Here's a passage about how the Lord is blind to our evils. And here's another passage explaining why the Lord is blind to our evils, because he does not look for our wrongs. So think about the delight that you can take in seeing the wrong that other people do. And when you start spinning over and over and over, and you spend 3 hours, stirring resentment, unfortunately there is a delight that is active that is causing you to spend 3 hours of time, because we don't spend 3 hours of time on something unless there's some kind of motivation. So this is saying the Lord is, as it were, blind to our evils, not because he doesn't see them, of course, but because he doesn't dwell on them. That's a really important thing, and that's another passage talking about the same thing.
Maybe you could print out all quotes if people want them.
And the idea is that passage talks about, and this is one you've heard lots of times in church, look for the good in people, and if you see evil, endeavor with them to correct it. In other words, not saying you don't see it, but look at it constructively. Look at the wrong you see constructively, what John was saying earlier about how can I help that person? How can I look at them with compassionate eyes, even if I don't want them in my life? Because sometimes, it's not safe to have that person in my life, but I can at least not hate you. Okay, so the danger of not forgiving is that we invite hell in. They did something to our external, and then we decide to invite them into our internal by dwelling on that and bringing in resentment and a desire for punishment. One of the ways that I've defined unforgiveness or forgiveness is giving up the right to hate someone. That's strong language, but I'd like you to reflect on that, because when we hold bitterness, there is a component of hate in that. And if we can get that out, then we can take stands. We can say, I'm calling the police. We can say, I need you to never talk to me again. We can make very strong stands, but it's not going to be from hate. Yeah?
Well, does the fact whether we forgive someone or not have any effect on that person at all, or is it just an internal thing and what we are paying attention to in ourselves?
Forgiveness is entirely internal. What we do with the person may lead to reconciliation, or it may not. It may lead to their going in prison. It may lead to a restraining order where we never see the person again. It may lead to a whole lot of things. But forgiveness is about, I choose not to hate you, and therefore I'm going to now choose to act with integrity. I'm going to say, where is the Lord in the situation, which John referred to. And that could include some strong statements, some strong actions, but it's not going to be from hate.
Why can't I hate someone who's done something really awful?
Because it damages you.
Yeah, right. It's sort of saying, I hate you. I hate you.
I don't necessarily feel that.
No, you don't, but hate is fundamentally from hell. Dislike, feel distaste for, feel zeal about, those can be heavenly. Hate is, I want you to suffer.
Yeah, I might.
Well, there's some things to work on, John. Yeah.
Isn't that about revenge?
Yeah, it is about revenge, and that's what that second story that I read about the £2 billion versus the 10,000 pounds. Go ahead and write up a list of every wrong thing that you've done in the last month, and then add to that list all the things that you would have done if you could have gotten away from them. All the times that you slowed down to 25 in a 25 zone, but you might have actually gone 50 because it would have been fun. And, little old ladies, please get out of the way. Okay, do you know what I mean? There's an awful lot of stuff that we would have done. That's a big list that the Lord is keeping us safe from. And if we can have perspective and say, it's not me and God up here and you, lowly little sinner, down here. It's actually God up here to I may never have done what you've done, but I've done some pretty bad things. And that changes the perspective, doesn't it? It says, okay, this is not about me hating, it's about getting perspective, even if they never say sorry. I think that that's the hardest thing for a lot of people, that they never said sorry. My dad hates a movie that I love because he keeps on saying he never said sorry. And it just bugs him that the person wouldn't say sorry. They fell in love, but he never said sorry. It's just a big thing for us. Forgiveness is not about that. Forgiveness is about looking at that person from the point of view of good. Okay? So, you can call the police, you can do all of those things and still forgive. So, forgiveness, who am I? We have to acknowledge the harm done. You cannot forgive unless you acknowledge the harm done. This was done, it was wrong. If it was intended, it was evil. You can't judge intent, but it looked like it. So if this was on purpose, it was evil. Then you have to take responsibility for your reaction. And your reaction is the thing where the hells try to do double jeopardy, or double damage, not double jeopardy. Double damage by making you, not only did you get hurt on the outside, but now they want to get you hurt on the inside. That's the thing that you're pushing away. I don't want the hells in my life because of what you did. I want the hells in my life because of what you did. I don't want the hells in my life because of what you did. I'm repeating that because it's so hard to get, isn't it?
Well, also because I feel like we have to repeat it to ourselves all the time.
Right. But just load that one. I don't want the hells in my life because of what you did. I don't want the hells in my life because of what you did. Because now you're fighting the right battle. Go away. I'll take care of you in a minute. Go away.
So why does it feel so difficult then when you are doing the right thing? Or you think you're doing the right, or you're doing the best you can. Why is it so difficult?
Being a good person is hard. One of the things that I've observed is that a lot of the atheists I know seem very happy. Because if you're not worrying about spiritual life, you don't have to fight evils. You just kind of skim along.
Can't we just skim?
Yeah, I know. That's no. In the world you will have tribulation, the Lord said, but be of good cheer, I have overcome the world. He's not saying it's going to be easy, he's saying you'll win.
And he forgave someone for sticking him on the cross, didn't he? So
he did that.
That was pretty ultimate.
Mr. Banniston.
So, is it better, or actually is it destructive to choose not to take offence in the first place? In other words, I'll let that go. Because you've got, things happen all the way through the day, big things, little things, and you can choose to take offence, and if you dwell on it, and then you're into the whole, oh well, I've got to recognise that as an evil, I've got to go through the process of, in my mind, forgiving that person. Whereas if I, being as forgetful as I am, if I ignore it for 5 minutes, I'll have forgotten it anyway.
Yeah.
So, but maybe I'm being destructive through that behaviour as well. I'm not giving myself a chance to grow as a. I'm becoming a bit of a bland, non-discriminating, not discerning person. As well.
I think most things we probably should forget. There was somebody going 20 miles under the speed limit on the way up here, and I commented to Ann, this person's going 20 miles under the speed limit. And they got a full minute of airtime that they absolutely, not they, but the hells, got a full minute of airtime in my life, maybe even 2 or 3, that they didn't need. It would have been so much healthier if I just could have said, look at that, they're going 20 miles under the speed limit. There's nothing I can do about it. Because there was nothing I could do about it. So I could either be miserable or I could be peaceful. And I think in so many instances, we can just forget about it. And when someone cuts you off in traffic and you drop the F-bomb on them, you haven't helped anything, you've just invited hell in. So many times, we should forget about it. And when you say, hey, Carrie, and she said, yeah. And you start to be like, what's with you? You know, normally it's just like, forget about it, right? Forget about it. But so, you know, pick your battles. So yes, I think that we mostly should let go, and then they're all, for all of us, they're going to be big ones.
There's going to be enough of those.
And they
There'll
mostly,
be plenty, yes.
they're going to be plenty, and most of them are going to be in our more intimate relations, because those are the people who can hurt us the most. You know, if a stranger said something to you, it's very different from if your brother said the same thing. If your cousin cheats you, it's much worse than if some stranger cheats you.
Yeah.
Same thing.
And probably at this point in our lives, you've grown up knowing that you're supposed to overlook. I mean, so you've practiced already the littler things. You're probably quicker at just going, actually, that's not an important battle, and I don't want to waste my time thinking on that because that's, you know. So I think that's a small bit of progress, and you just relate it. But it's the bigger things that are going to be more.
Yeah, right. I think forgiveness is one of the places where we ultimately say, I'm in charge of what happens in here. And I think it's so hard because the very nature of the offense feels like we're not in charge. You did it to me. And the thing is that ultimately we are the only people who have any charge of what happens in our hearts and in our minds. And forgiveness is about saying 100% of this is me. You can influence data in, but I'm responsible for my response. And that's the not hating. And you can still call the cops to pick the dramatic thing. Or you can still say, we're no longer friends. Or I'm no longer willing to do business with you. Or you're sleeping on the couch tonight.
And your response to it is also the beginning of a whole other area of psychology and how you work out things. Or, you know, that's the next, my responsibility, and that's a whole other.
Right, reconciliation would be a really fun topic to discuss too, wouldn't it? Because that's the whole, I think we've been wanting to like, oh, let's go there. But actually, no. Let's first say, I'm responsible for me. Then from that place of being calm, of not being filled with hate, then maybe we can go forward and find a way to meet in the middle, because I'm actually looking for the good in you, not just at the harm.
Can you print out just the quote parts? The quotes from
Probably. Yes.
I'd love to have those.
Okay, great. I'm going to stop. I can keep talking. People want to stay here and keep talking about this. I'm very happy to keep going until lunchtime in 20 minutes, because it's such a huge topic, but I also feel the need to release you.
And we do have the sharing group at 2.
Yeah. So you would like those before then?
I'd love to.
And where is that, Anne?
Yeah, that's a good question. Probably in Cedar, I think. That
In Cedar. Thank you. I don't think that's on the thing.
I think it is.
All right, thanks everyone.